I always feel like it's saying instinctively good Shabbos. I find myself in this knot. There's an old, you hear me okay? There's an old story, perhaps apocryphal, about a US president in a meeting with the Soviet premier. In some versions it's Kennedy, and in some versions it's Reagan, referencing the two populations of the US and the USSR, which were respectively both around 200 million people at the time. And the president remarked to the Soviet premier, you know, the difference between us is that you have 200 million subjects and I have 200 million bosses. And that's the difference, of course, between democracy and dictatorship. And I think the Jewish model of leadership agrees with the American president in that story. In this week's Parsha Korach, it's clear that Korach subscribes to the dictatorship model, which is precisely what makes him jealous of Moshe and Aaron and desirous of that power for himself. Rav Lachem, Korach says, the accusation he levels at Moshe and Aaron, you have too much, which Rashi interprets to mean you're hogging all the glory and the greatness for yourself. Korach thinks that leadership is about power and fame and glory. It's perhaps precisely to dispel this notion that the Parsha ends with a reiteration of the many responsibilities of the Leviim, the spiritual leaders, to show that leadership is not about having more privilege, but rather about having more responsibility. The leader is the servant of his or his constituents and not the ruler. It's also for this reason that the Torah gives the Leviim less land, less power, and makes them dependent on the tithing of the people who they serve. We're honoring two people tonight who understand all too well that being a leader of a community means being a servant of that community. There's really not much power and glory in it. There's just a lot of hard work, sometimes thankless and unnoticed. It's for that reason that Jay was here this morning in Shul for morning minyan, as he is every week on Wednesday morning, and often more than that. It's one way in which he helps the community. And not just that, but staying after minyan to help set up that projector, which you see over here. None of this happens on its own. Half of it happens from Jay and Jen Blumenstein. At the dinner at which he himself was being honored, the projector, which was procured last minute by who? Jane Blumenstein. We managed to procure it when no one else knew how or where, no one else was willing or able. We lost our projector in the office last minute. Who do we call upon? Jane, who we're honoring. We have to make her work at her own dinner. We were all joking how ironic it was that Jay and Jane were working so hard at the dinner at which they themselves were being honored. But it's really not ironic. It's precisely the reason we're honoring them in the first place. So it's my hope and my tefillah for us tonight that their attitude rubs off on all of us, that we all come to realize that to be a leader of the community, first you must become a servant to the community, and then you will inevitably become recognized as a leader. May Jay and Jane inspire us to follow their example.